Yeah, remember when I said things were going to get a little bit controversial? This is kind of what I meant. But this video needs to happen because I'm a little upset and you should be too. I should probably clarify. When I say upset, I mean I'm pissed off, okay? There has been a ruling recently in the state of Alabama in the Supreme Court that has. I've been hearing more and more about it on the news, and I had to make a video talking about it because it's gone over the top. Things have really gotten out of control. The Alabama Supreme Court, essentially, what they did, there was a ruling that they made based off of some people at a clinic for work with IVF, in vitro fertilization. They did. I don't know if they dropped or what happened. Somehow, some embryos got destroyed by accident, right? And so the couples that were involved, there's three couples, I believe, that were involved in this situation. And they sued, saying that they should be able to hold these people criminally liable for homicide. And the case went all the way up to the Supreme Court in Alabama, and the Supreme Court in Alabama ruled that these embryos were babies on religious grounds. Now, I don't care if you can come up with a legal definition, if you can come up with a legal way that we can all agree on. You can rule whatever you want to rule, but the minute you start bringing your Bible and your God into government and telling others how they should live their lives based off of your religious principles, you're dead wrong. Now, I'll make the disclaimer, I used to be a Christian. I was a conservative Christian back when I was a teenager, even into my 20s, right? In my early 20s. I believed in God. I was... go to church on Sundays, all that good stuff. I eventually grew out of that. And I realized I am currently an atheist. All right. I don't believe that God exists. And what that means is that I reject your claim. If you're making a claim that God exists, whether it's the God of the Bible or the Torah or the Quran, my mind went blank for a minute there. No matter what God that happens to be, I reject that claim based on the fact that I don't have sufficient evidence to act as if it's real. And what that means is essentially, I'm not going to believe in something that I don't have evidence for. The flying spaghetti monster is a good example that people have come up with over the years as something that could be real. You just have to believe, right? And it's just this giant monster that flies out in space. It's made up of, if I remember right, it's got a couple of eyeballs, meatballs as eyes, and spaghetti, flying around tentacles and that kind of stuff. And basically, the saying is, "Hey, the flying spaghetti monster thinks this. You should do this, but because I believe it to be real, so you should have to believe it too. I don't have any evidence for it to be real, but you should too." And it's the same thing, all right, with religion. And if you're religious and you clicked on this video because you were angry or upset about the fact that I dare say, keep your God out of my government. The fact of the matter is the Founding Fathers, the Constitution of the United States of America, has separation of church and state built in. The government shall make no laws establishing a religion. That is what the Constitution says. And because when you start going down that road, when you start going down a theocracy, you wind up in a situation where you wind up like there are plenty of theocracies around the world that their people are suppressed and they treat people like shit. And they go off of a holy book that has no evidence of being real. And think about it this way. Whatever your religion is, imagine you had to live under the laws of another religion. I remember back in the day when the Republicans had this big thing after 9/11 saying, they were they were racist as hell. They still are. But they were saying that the Muslims were going to come in here and they were going to implement Sharia law every time that somebody ran on anything to do that they didn't like. It was going to be Sharia law because that's what Islam holds as the tenets of what they would hold in other countries, right? Based on the Islamic principles. Not that that's going to happen, but the minute you start putting any kind of religion into government, people can start to say, oh, well, if you're going to rule based off of your religion, I'm going to rule based off of my religion. You know, if you don't like the fact that somebody is ruling based off of their Christianity, you wouldn't want somebody ruling based off of their being Islam or Jewish or Hinduism, Buddhism. You wouldn't want somebody ruling based off of those things, right? We're a nation of laws, not a nation of the Bible. And you need to think about that long and hard. If you're the kind of person that's like, oh yeah, let's bring government, or let's bring our religion in, because it isn't just about your religion. Your religion isn't the only religion. And you need to think about the fact that there are good people out there that don't believe in your God, and you should not be allowed to tell me how to live my life based off of your God. And that goes straight into this IVF stuff, because you have the Alabama Supreme Court now. For years, we've heard from these people, life begins at conception. The minute that the sperm meets the egg, that's when life begins. Now they're trying to say that life begins before conception, that these embryos are basically babies. And that's bullshit. Especially because now it's screwing with the ability to even offer IVF, because we have hospitals, we have facilities shutting down, refusing to do these procedures, denying people the ability to have a child because they're afraid of being sued. Because what happens with IVF is you get a bunch of embryos, and you try with all of the embryos, and usually one or two make it, and the rest of them die. And now, because of this ruling, these facilities are afraid that their doctors or their nurses, anybody involved in the process, could be charged with murder over these embryos that don't make it as part of the procedure. It's ridiculous. And these people, these Supreme Court justices, should be ashamed. When Roe v. Wade got overturned a couple of years ago, the Supreme Court of the United States, the justices on there should be ashamed of themselves. Every single congressman, every single person that wants to govern based on their religion, that is in a position of power, should be ashamed with themselves. That is not okay. That is not the way we do things in the United States of America. And they're playing an interview. They've been playing it off and on with Nikki Haley. And she has personal views that align with what the Supreme Court in Alabama did. But the difference, and what they don't seem to care about, because once you've said something, when you're a politician, no matter what it is you say, no matter what your intention is, the media runs with it, right? And now they're running with this idea that, oh, Nikki Haley wants to implement this thing. She said that her personal beliefs are different from what she thinks should be done with the governance. That she doesn't think that this stuff should be used as part of governing, especially for abortion. You know, a nationwide abortion ban should not be on the table, even though she disagrees with it. She understands that you can have personal views and you can have how you govern as two separate things. A lot of times the problem is people have a lot of difficulty tearing those two things apart. But some people are actually capable of it. Some people, whatever your personal belief is, have your personal belief. If you want to go to church on Sundays, if you want to read your Bible, if you want to pray every single night, whatever your personal belief is, have your personal belief. I don't have a problem with that. And we can debate all day long about the personal beliefs. But the minute you try to take your personal belief and try to tell me how to live my life, that's where we have a problem. When you try to implement laws based on nothing more than your religious text, then we have a problem. And maybe eventually I'll make an entire video about morals and ethics and how those things derive from just a view of humanity in general and the well-being of humanity, as opposed to from a God. That's not this video, though. This video was one where I'm just pissed off, and I need to say something. I needed to speak out because I'm so sick and tired of hearing these mostly Republicans that are bringing their religion into the courtroom, that are bringing their religion into their lawmaking. You know, Roe v. Wade was overturned a couple years ago, and we're on the precipice of having marriage equality overturned. The court is actually talking about that. They're talking about banning a pill that women can take for their own health that basically stops a baby from forming. They are getting into the bedroom. They are getting into women's bodies, women's uteruses, telling them what they can and can't do with their own body and their own uterus. And it's all based off of a holy book and nothing more than that. There is no legal grounds to overturn things like Roe v. Wade. There is no legal grounds to overturn things like marriage equality. Those things should have been there in the first place. The reason those rulings existed in the first place is because you had these conservative nut jobs, these religious wackos, that get up there and say, my holy book says that you shouldn't be allowed to do this, so I'm going to challenge that you shouldn't be allowed to do this. And it gets through with just the right court justices up to a certain point. With Roe v. Wade, it got all the way up to the Supreme Court being challenged before they finally said, no, we can't have this. And that stood as rule of law for nearly 4 decades before being overturned by the most conservative Supreme Court we have. And that's why things like this election this fall matters so much. Because the person in the White House, 9 times out of 10, gets to pick the Supreme Court justices. Except for situations like in 2015, 2016, when the Republicans said, yeah, we're not going to hear we're not going to do a case, or we're not going to look at new Supreme Court justices until after the election, when they have their double standard. And when they get us in a situation where basically it's easy as hell to bring things before the Supreme Court and make them, your way if you're religious, because the majority of the Supreme Court justices right now are bought and paid for in religious nut jobs. And they bring that religion into their rulings because they say it's part of my personal self. Screw that. If you're even half the judge you should be, your personal views don't come into your rulings. You look at the law, and yes, you have to interpret the law, but you interpret the law based on secular views. You don't bring your religious input in when you're interpreting the law. Because when you start to do that, you're screwing over an entire section of the populace. And you are wrong. Well, this was a rather intense video, but I needed to make a point. I needed to talk and that's what this is good. This entire vlog series is going to be. Whenever I feel like I need to make a video, I'm going to get up and I'm going to make a video. I've literally been sitting here today. Let's start off. I've got a new exercise routine now. And so I started off exercising, had some breakfast, and sat down on the couch to watch some news and fell asleep. It happens to be the day the phones were out. AT&T had a massive issue. So I fell asleep, and then I woke up seeing the coverage of this, what's going on in Alabama. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I need to talk about this because this is stupid. This is ridiculous, and this should not be a thing. So I want to thank you all that stuck around. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this issue. I don't mind having debates and discussions based on religious viewpoints as long as they're respectful. That's all that I ask, is that you be respectful and we can have these conversations. You can come over to the Discord. We can have the conversations. I don't mind that. The minute you start to do the ad hominem attacks, going after me or other people personally, that's where we have a problem. But if we can have a respectful conversation, I'm all for that. So I'm going to do the same thing. I think this is going to be a new thing at the end of these videos now. I'm going to pop on some music, and I'm going to pop on a picture of a puppy. Because I think some of these things get so intense, and some of these things get so... I get really passionate about some of these things. And so I want to you cool down at the end of the video. You can see what video YouTube recommends you to watch, and subscribe if you're not subscribed, and you can join the Patreon. I forgot to shout the Patreon out in the last video. I did put the names up at the beginning, but I forgot to shout it out. So if you want to join the Patreon, you can help me continue to do stuff like this just by heading over there, and you get your name in the video. You get early access to videos, an even more direct connection with me. There's a private channel in Discord for Patreon, or you have direct messages on Patreon. You can send me direct messages. I'm cool with that too. So all of that's available and even more, so go check that out if that's something you're interested in. Otherwise, I want to thank you all for watching, and everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.
Been saving every penny for to make up through the fall, working for that dollar, but it never adds up at all. Coming around the riverbank, heard the old train whistle sing. The very next thing you hear from me, I've been taught.